Hi there, business owner. Are you looking to improve your business knowledge? Do you want to see behind the scenes of successful businesses? And more importantly, are you looking to build a better business in just 15 minutes each week? If so, you're in the right place. Welcome to the 3Bs podcast. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast. If you're new here, hi, I'm your host Stephanie, and the 3Bs podcast is your 15-minute weekly dose of business motivation, inspiration and knowledge to help you build a better business. This week, I want to talk about that jump between working on your own to taking on that first hire. Now, I know as a business owner from personal experience that it feels like such a big step in your business when you go from working on your own to having that first hire. Now, your first hire could be somebody that you outsource to. It could be somebody that you have a freelancer in. It could be a part-time employee, a full-time employee, or an apprentice. Like, there's many different ways to take on your first hire, but I know how big of a step and how anxious a lot of business owners feel when making that decision on what is the right place for them to go. So I thought this week I would talk about our personal experience taking on staff in a variety of different ways and letting you know about the things that came up that I didn't realize to hopefully help you as you build your business. So let's get on with the episode. So it's time for you to make your first hire. You've got more work to do than you can possibly fulfill yourself, or you want to spend more time working on the business and less time in it. So the first thing that we needed to do is actually be realistic with what capacity we needed, like how much work hours did we need? How much time did we need? How many staff members did we need? That was the first thing, because as a business owner, it is so easy to get pulled in so many different directions. And if you had somebody specifically focused on that one task or that one job role alone, so if you took off your accountancy hat, for example, and gave that to an accountant, the time it would take you is not the same amount of time it would take them. They would be quicker and more efficient at it because they're not being pulled in many different directions. And they're also an expert and trained in that field. So it's worth knowing that you need to be realistic with what time you need. If it's taking you 2 days, it's unlikely it's going to take a new hire the same amount of time, specifically if they're already trained. Yes, it takes slightly longer at the beginning. And that's another thing you need to be aware of, is that the time you're going to spend training or even helping this person learn your processes and your business methods and the way you work will take longer to start with. And as they do it more and more, they get quicker, they get more efficient, and you don't need to have as much input or like check their work, for example. When you're on your own, everything falls down to you. And as a business owner, I often use the term fly by the seat of my pants. I'm winging it. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I definitely did that to begin with. I would work on the next most pressing thing. There was never any real structure. It was firefighting the whole time. When you start taking on staff, you don't firefight as much. You get your procedures straight. You get your methods straight. One of the first things I got my new hire to do was to write down every single thing that I was teaching her to do. Write a procedure written down with screenshots for every single thing that I do. There is things like Scribe, and there's Google Chrome extensions. We use ClickUp for our practice management software, and that has clips functions in it. So we can literally screenshot as we go. But I do like them to write it down because, one, it's there. It's becoming almost like a Bible for how we work in our business. So it's there if they need to refer back to it and they're not constantly asking me. And then also it helps me see where the gaps are. So for example, it sounds really bad, but I'm going to be really honest with you guys because I think honesty is the best policy. I said goodbye to a client. We were no longer a good fit for them. Our complete business structure had changed, our accountancy practice. So we had to disengage with a client. There was no gross misconduct. There was nothing bad. It just, we were no longer a good fit for them. And for what they needed, our price point was too high. And I knew that. So with good conscience, I was like, you know, we had no offboarding process. I'd never got rid of a client before. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what was the correct way to do it. And in business, you're always going to come across something new. But if you start writing down procedures for every single thing in your business But you won't have the time as a business owner, so get your staff to do it. They learn the procedure. If you create that culture, they can also offer their opinions. And that was the best thing about having an extra hire in the office with me, was that it was no longer just my opinions that mattered. It was no longer just my ideas. Me and ChatGPT were best mates, but it's really important to have somebody else's opinion that understands your business in a way that only somebody that was on the inside would. So it's really important to, when you're looking at your first hire, look at what job role you're going to give them. So the first thing I did when I took on a hire was like, oh, just come in and help me in the office for a bit. Like, that's not a good idea. You need to be clear on what job role they're going to do. What part of your workload are they going to take away from you? And the best ones to do are the ones you either are not the strongest in. So we have a lot of clients that come to us because they're tradesmen or they're hairdressers. They don't want to be bookkeepers. They don't want to do accounts. They don't deal with numbers. Their business is what they enjoy doing and what they're passionate about. So they hand off the accountancy and outsource to us because that's not where they are strong. And also the bits they don't like. So if there's a part of your business that you don't like, and there will be a part of your business you don't like, for me, it's the admin of it all. Like, I leave my inbox till last. It's always at the bottom of the pile alongside my own work, but we'll come back to that. The bits that you don't enjoy would be the types of jobs that I would recommend you getting a new hire in for, whether that is full-time, part-time, remote, in the office, freelance, however it best works for you. Going back to leaving it till last, one thing I did in business for a really long time was leave my own business to last. And it made me a really poor example because I was the last my books were the last to be done. My VAT was the last to go in. My self-assessment was always the last to go in. I never put my own business first. I always put my clients' work first. And I think a lot of business owners do the same thing. A good example of that is my dad. So growing up, my mum didn't work, but my dad was a car mechanic and still is a car mechanic. And I vividly remember our N-Reg Vauxhall Corsa. It was faded red, you know, the red paint that used to fade to pink. And it had holes in the floor. And I so vividly remember my dad having to get the car in the garage and weld up the hole in the floor to put it through its MOT. Like, we literally were driven around in cars with no floor. Like, our car was the biggest heap of junk ever because he spent all his time doing his clients' cars, doing his friends' cars, making sure his parents' cars were up to scratch. It's quite funny when you look back at it, really. It's quite scary how unsafe we were all being travelled around, but it's very easy, and I think it's quite a natural human response to put others before yourself, and it's not easy to be selfish. But in business, as a business owner, if you take anything from this week's episode, put your own business first. Like, your business can be a shining example of what you do. So whether you are a hairdresser and your hair should be your literal walking advertisement, whether you're service-based, so if you're a mortgage advisor, your mortgage should not be the last one to be done. You can be your own testimonial, your own walking advertisement. And I think that's really important to remember. So we went down the employed role, and it was literally just 4 hours a week to begin with, administration, which then doubled to 8 and then went up to 10 and then is about to go up again. And the more work that you hand over frees you up to have more time to work on the business, on the other areas of the business, to grow it and scale it. So we took on an employed role. So when you take on an employee, you need to make sure that they can work in the UK. So usually that is a visa or right to work in the UK, which is passport, driving license, birth certificate if they don't have photo ID. You will also need to complete a starter form if they are going on the payroll. If you're not already registered as an employer, a bookkeeper or an accountant can help you get registered, but you need to register as an employer to run a payroll if they're employed in your company. The new starter form is available from the HMRC website, and that helps with the tax obligations. You will also need their bank details to be able to pay them, and know how to calculate things like annual leave. So annual leave from April 2024, you can now use the 12.07% rule again, which used to exist, then went away and is now back again. And that is how to calculate annual leave if your staff are working irregular hours or your hours are changing and fluctuating. So if they work the same amount every week, every month, then of hours and same amount of days, then they can have 5.6 weeks, which is equivalent. You also need to be aware that bank holidays can be included in their entitlement if they are due to work on that day. So if your employee usually works on a Monday, 5 or 6 of the 8 we get each year in the UK will usually fall on a Monday. And their annual leave accrues. And the other thing that's really important to remember is that annual leave accrues even when they're not there. So if they are off sick, or if they are taking maternity or paternity or adoption, they still accrue annual leave. So many of my clients don't realize that annual leave is still being accrued even when they're not physically working in the company, but they're still employed by the company. Another thing is pensions when you're talking about employees. So if your employee earns over the secondary national insurance threshold, then you have to enroll them in a workplace pension. If you choose to freelance or outsource your work, be sure that your agreements are clear and in place and that they cover all eventualities, especially like who's responsible for what and what is expected of them, and also things like overtime and additional projects and confidentiality. I see so many agreements that do not have confidentiality. In fact, I have seen NDAs, which are confidentiality agreements. So you can't disclose what's in them. Specifically when you're working with the bigger businesses, the NDAs can be quite extensive, but I've actually seen NDAs where you're not allowed to discuss the company that the NDA is from, and the company's name is plastered all over the top of the NDA in headed paper, which just I find hilarious. So make sure your agreements are in place if you're freelancing, and also ensure communication is regular. Communication is the biggest problem in 99% of the businesses I see, in 99% of life, even down to my children's school. Like, the communication is utterly awful. And the parents that I talk to with children at other schools often have the same problem. Like, communication is key. Noting things down is key. And as a business owner that has worked on your own for the whole time, you will keep everything in your head. You'll keep so much information in your head and not written down despite your best efforts. So if you are growing to the point where you are looking to hire, it's definitely worth starting to write those things down, particularly if you work with a whole number of clients and there's different rules for each. So one of the clients that we work with in the practice offer different terms to wholesale clients to retail clients. So when we invoice their orders, there's different rules for both, but then certain clients don't have a deposit and balance. Some clients only have a balance when the order's sent because they're a long-standing client and the terms haven't been updated. Some clients have different payment dates and payment terms. Some have different purchase order systems. So, and all these things just used to sit in my head because I always did them. I learned them. I understood them. So when I handed off that responsibility to my staff, they couldn't understand it. They couldn't wrap their head around it because it was all in my, I'm like, oh no, you just do that. Oh, you just do that. Oh no, that one. No, with that one, you just changed the due date to that one. They run on a different terms and conditions contract to the others. Write it down. Please write it down, because it saves you a lot of time and a lot of headache down the road. And if you can, spend your CEO hour a week. So that hour a week, I always recommend you take out of your business to work on it. So whether that is doing your marketing campaigns, reviewing your KPIs, reviewing the analytics of your post to see which is the most popular, or whether that is you working on your own business, start writing down some of the nuances. Create a Bible. That's what we call it, a Bible. It can also be called a standard operating procedure or a normal operating procedure. So ABCS UK has its own Bible, the 3Bs has its own Bible, and it details all the processes that happen in the business. So theoretically, if I was to leave the business tomorrow, somebody else could take my place. If I was off sick tomorrow, somebody else could take my place, and it would detail all of the procedures and all the nuances for the business to continue operating. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the 3Bs podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please connect with us on social media. Like, rate and review wherever you are listening to this podcast so that I can help more business owners build a better business. See you next week.